Live from Washington, D.C., Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Sekulow.
پرچم شیطان است، پرچم شیطان بزرگ است. مرگ بر اسرائیل، مرگ بر امریکا.
Graphic new video of violent protests and terror attacks coming out of Israel.
They have a gender apartheid inside Gaza. Christians are evacuating because churches are being burned. Their doctrine is fascist and genocidal against Jews.
Today, the group Hamas declared a day of rage, urging attacks on Israelis.
Peace has no greater enemy than the forces of militant Islam.
Any moment, you know, these rockets and missiles on the border with Lebanon could be sprung and fired against Israel.
Iran gets nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia will, Egypt will, Turkey, perhaps others. So in 5 to 10 years, you could have a multipolar nuclear Middle East with half a dozen countries with nuclear weapons. That is a formula for insecurity.
And Al-Qaeda are these terrorist groups with the goal of destroying the West.
We got multiple officers here. We got officers running here, back eastbound, chasing, now on foot.
So we understand people are scared, and we understand that there's concern that there may be more folks out there.
When they say that Israel should be wiped out, that they mean it?
I don't have the luxury not to believe this.
Israel's right to exist has been a cornerstone for the ACLJ since its inception. With an office in the heart of Jerusalem, ACLJ continues to be a leader in the advocacy for the Jewish state of Israel. Chief Counsel Sekulow has brought together ACLJ's leading experts from around the globe to present Protecting the Promised Land, the Case for Israel.
Hey, welcome to the broadcast, everyone. And this is a special day indeed, and that is the embassy, the United States Embassy in Israel has now been relocated to Jerusalem. What does that mean? It means the United States, back in December, recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. That was significant. That law had been on the books for 20 years, but no president had the guts to do it, and this president did. And what he did was not only recognize Jerusalem as the capital, but took the consulate in Jerusalem and converted it into the embassy. It's historically significant for two reasons. Number one, a sovereign nation, Israel, has the right to determine where its capital is. In this particular case, it has been Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the Jewish people, of the Jewish state of Israel. That's number one. Number two, we're just complying with international law, recognizing that a sovereign nation's capital is where that sovereign nation says its capital is. So this was also symbolically significant because it's not just the United States. Guatemala is going to be recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and other governments are now saying they're going to do the same thing. So you've got this move. It takes this issue off the table. Now, on the broadcast today, we're talking about a case for Israel, protecting the promised land. And by the way, this is a special that we put together, but you can get the whole special on our website as well.
You can get that at acljfilms.com. ACLJfilms.com. Again, ACLJfilms.com will have that available, so you can find that right there. It's Protecting the Promised Land. It's a new full-length documentary by our team at ACLJ Films. Fantastic piece. You sit down, have a round table. We also have news pieces, round table with some of the leaders from Israel.
And it is now official, as we're coming to you today, the United States of America's embassy for the United States, for Israel, is now located in Jerusalem. This is something we've been working on for over 20 years.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a lot bigger deal than maybe even some have seen, as we've seen these big moves in the last 12, 24 months, or 12 months really, for Jerusalem. And we put together this piece at ACLJ Films that you're really going to enjoy. You're going to hear excerpts from that today throughout the rest of the show. However, if you want to see the full-length documentary that we've put together, all you have to do is go to ACLJfilms.com and follow the instructions on how to watch it, where to watch it. It'll all be available there, again, on ACLJfilms.com. And make sure you share that with your friends. Go share that link. It's something that they need to see. They need to know why it's important for Jerusalem to be the capital. They also need to know why it's important and why Israel and all these things happen in such a small country, and why it makes such a huge difference around the world. Again, that's at ACLJfilms.com.
All right, we're going to be back with more on this, including our special. This is a great program we put together. What a week to celebrate Israel. What a week to celebrate the United States recognition of Jerusalem as the capital with the move of the embassy. Back with more in a moment.
I wanted this book to send a very clear message and present a very clear defense on the importance of recognizing Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. I wanted to dispel the legal myths that were out there that Israel doesn't have the right to exist as a Jewish state, that Israel could not designate Jerusalem as its capital, that under international law the Israelis were somehow violating the human rights of others. And none of that was true. They're engaged in lawfare, utilization of the legal system to delegitimize the state of Israel. I built this almost as a Supreme Court case. Not only Israel has the right to exist, but has the right to exist as a Jewish state, and that they're entitled to the full recognition of any other sovereign government.
From New York Times bestselling author Jay Sekulow comes his new book, Jerusalem, a biblical and historical case for the Jewish capital.
The latest harvest is ready for bottling at Psagot, an Israeli winery in the West Bank. Owner Jacob Berg says business is growing, but so is a boycott movement against his wine.
It's not the final customer. It's not the majority of the world that believe in those things. It's really it's very, very small organization, few organization. The problem is that they have a lot of power and they have a lot of money.
That organization is BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Movement. Co-founder Omar Barghouti started BDS a decade ago to force Israel to end what he says is a system of discrimination against Palestinians. His movement has activists in many countries and tens of thousands of followers on social media.
Support for the BDS movement has been growing on British campuses, but critics accuse it of fueling anti-Semitism and attacks against Jewish students.
No one protected us. No one was there to keep us safe. No one was there for the aftermath of it. No one asked if we were okay.
People breaking in through windows, banging on the doors. I thought I was in the middle of a war.
We've had a number of cases with a number of students that have stood up for their rights, but the reason they had to stand up for their rights was because they were being attacked, sometimes physically, sometimes verbally, because of their stand on Israel. And it's not just Jewish students we're talking about.
Yeah, the university campus is an excellent place to start because the lie that BDS feeds off of is that this is not anti-Semitism, it's anti-Zionism or anti-Israel. And yet you see students who have literally no ties to the state but are just Jewish or have said things like, I support the state of Israel without any kind of political ramifications, being attacked, and even again up to physically attacked, being harassed. And it's important again as well, you know, ACLJ, we're a free speech supporting organization. There's a difference between legitimate criticism of Israel and what BDS is. BDS is not the legitimate criticism of Israel. BDS is feeding on the kind of imprecision and distorted tactics that we talked about when we were discussing lawfare to make Israel into a pariah and then to create this false sense of civil rights that feeds on impressionable young students.
What I would like to say is that perhaps the most outrageous thing about BDS is its very name. Because people say BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions. How come is it that you automatically mean Israel? There are so many countries in the world which really deserve to be boycotted, divested, sanctioned. And yet you say BDS, of course, what could it be other than Israel? That in itself is just so outrageous and surreal.
We shouldn't forget, you know, people think that boycott, divestment, and sanctions might not be the biggest deal, that when the Nazis came to power, the first thing that they did was set up a boycott of Jewish businesses.
That's how effective their propaganda campaign has been, that acronym. It refers to Israel and Israel only. With all the horrors going on in the world, BDS stands for Israel. And that's one of the things that we continuously work on here at the American Center, is really educating people following our work as to what the methodology and the approaches are of this enemy out there that is spreading this misinformation campaign throughout the world, but on college campuses in the United States, because BDS, in terms of economic boycott and sanctions and divestiture, really hasn't been that successful.
No, it has not.
But what it has done, it has helped promulgate an anti-Semitism on college campuses throughout this country that is unprecedented.
You know, I've said that the BDS movement has encouraged a legitimacy, which is illegitimate to begin with, of anti-Semitism. In other words, they'll say, though, of course, it's not anti-Semitic, Jeff, it's anti-Israel because of Israel's policies, not against the Jews. But as I said at the beginning of this documentary, and I will say it again, that is part and parcel of the same people group. And this dichotomy they're trying to draw, this distinction, is a distinction with no difference.
100%. You know, when we started getting involved in this and very aggressive, taking leadership roles as ACLJ in this fight on so many levels, one of the things that kept on coming up was some of the other groups, many of the other groups, especially, you know, the Jewish groups were concerned we shouldn't make it about Jews, we shouldn't make it about Israel. Let's try to generically make rules against boycott. Well, you know what? This is about Jews, it is about Israel. This is a real fight. It's a fight in law.
Well, you know, I think, and Mark pointed out, what's really important is, you know, the purpose of the BDS movement is to delegitimize Israel and Jews. And that's exactly what happened in Europe before and during the Holocaust, is just delegitimizing Jews and making them worthless and people that were not worthy of living. And so on our college campuses today, these Jewish students go to school, and you can imagine as parents, you send your child to college to enjoy the college life, and they're hit with this vigilant form of anti-Semitism that's emotionally, physically, and destabilizing their entire career at their school and maybe their future.
But I think it's important for you to say again the fact that when you look at BDS, it is targeted, and very direct.
Cannot ignore the fact that only one country in the entire world is being picked on here. And which one is it? It's the Jewish one. Only one country is being singled out for this treatment. Only one.
You look at a country like Iran, that's one of the greatest human rights violators in the entire world. And after this Iran nuclear deal was reached, you have companies from all over the world flocking to do business in Iran. But is there a boycott of Iranian goods? No. In fact, the world is encouraged to go in there, and they have a track record of abusing their own citizens and foreigners.
Well, we've won in court on these BDS attempts. The fact is, it still creates this impression that it's okay to target Israel. And that's part of the battle here.
Well, you know, thank God Congress heard testimony last year from Jonathan Schanzer, a former U.S. Treasury official, about the fact that Hamas is actually funding the BDS movement. And we've seen on campus a real drop in BDS support after it became clear that there are operatives and money flowing through from terrorist organizations, U.S.-designated terrorist organizations, to the BDS movement. And so I think they've lost a little bit of the moral high ground on that point.
And they lost the moral high ground, and still we're also beating them in court.
Yeah.
So the courts are saying to them, no.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. They've tried their approach in federal courts throughout the country, and they've lost their position.
They keep bringing him back, but they keep losing.
And they've been rejected quickly and outright.
I think the issue persists, though, David. I mean, I think that this idea that, as you said, targeting it against, you say BDS, you assume Israel, because that's the way it is. That messaging will continue. So we've got to be prepared to be aggressive in fighting it anytime it raises.
You have to accept this is the new anti-Semitism. People generally don't go out and speak against Jews. If you want to bring your anti-Semitism out there, you speak against Israel and you catch it all. And BDS is perhaps the most widespread expression of that today.
But the reality is the whole BDS movement is based on a fundamental fraud. And that is the idea that what Israel does should be targeted because it's the Jewish state. Because at the end, that's what it's about.
All right, we'll be back with more from our film, Protecting the Promised Land, which again, full-length film available right now on acljfilms.com. We'll be right back.
I wanted this book to send a very clear message and present a very clear defense on the importance of recognizing Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. I wanted to dispel the legal myths that were out there that Israel doesn't have the right to exist as a Jewish state, that Israel could not designate Jerusalem as its capital, that under international law the Israelis were somehow violating the human rights of others. And none of that was true. They're engaged in lawfare, utilization of the legal system to delegitimize the state of Israel. I built this almost as a Supreme Court case. Not only Israel has the right to exist, but has the right to exist as a Jewish state, and that they're entitled to the full recognition of any other sovereign government.
From New York Times bestselling author Jay Sekulow comes his new book, Jerusalem, a biblical and historical case for the Jewish capital.
We've talked about the cases we've litigated, we've talked about the issues, we've talked about the United Nations. The question now is, how important is our position to be vigilant as it relates to the state of Israel?
Since 2002, when we met first, you and the ACLJ have been helping the state of Israel be stronger, defend Israel. I can give an example in 2002 and in 2006, where you personally, Jay, saved the Israeli economy. The Israeli economy was about to be bankrupt because of war, because of the Intifada, then because of the Second Lebanon War. I was called by the ministers in Jerusalem to ask me about the Israel friend in Washington that can help us with the State Department and with the President of the United States. You turned off the travel warning against Israel, which literally saved the Israeli economy, saved jobs for millions of people, saved the trade between Israel and the world, because without what you've done, foreign businessmen would not come to Israel, foreign tourists would not come to Israel, and that's just the first example.
Well, we couldn't do it without our member support. So those of you that support the work of the ACLJ were able to engage these issues. David, we've got 3 major legal projects going on right now, responding to something we're not actually seeing. We know what's basically in it because we know the arguments, but these are not transparent agencies we're dealing with.
You know, there's a huge, wide world out there, and I'm not exaggerating, there's this ongoing onslaught on so many fronts against Israel, just in the legal sphere alone, not to mention the public opinion sphere. And it is a wonderful thing, and I'm saying this because I'm aware of what ACLJ is doing, that ACLJ is standing up to this onslaught wherever it happens. We have no shortage of enemies, and they all realize that this is a place in the International Criminal Court where they might have some chance of success, and ACLJ is right there.
We actually have an office in Jerusalem that is fully functional with Rami's there, David's there, we've got teams there. it's important to be, I call it the ministry of presence. You got to be on the ground, engaging these issues at the forefront. And your support of the ACLJ continues to allow us to do that.
Yeah, and all of our attorneys, can't be on a television broadcast, can't be on a radio show every day. We have teams like that, but they've got teams also working with them as well. So I think for everybody out there to understand the importance of the actual manpower behind our efforts is important.
And what you've done at the UN, Jordan and Jay, and of course Stuart, has been a blessing to the state of Israel. I just met Danny Danon, Israel's ambassador to the UN in Jerusalem, when he came with Nikki Haley, the American ambassador. And you should have heard the praise from Danny Danon, the ambassador for Israel, about what ACLJ has done.
We actually take these issues and live them out every single day. And we know our supporters, that's why they support the ACLJ, so that we can work on those issues, whether they're at home here in the United States or in the state of Israel. It really is an honor to stand here at the United Nations, of all places, celebrating and not condemning the 50th anniversary of the reunification of Jerusalem. Because we all know what happens here almost at a daily basis at the United Nations. So it is historic for us to all be here tonight celebrating a reunified Jerusalem and the capital of Israel. "50 years is a very special number in the Jewish tradition. The rabbis noted in the ancient biblical text, a period of 50 years is sometimes referred to by the word le'olam. It also means forever. In the Talmud, Rabbi Akiva says that the word netzach, which means eternity or victory, refers to the city of Jerusalem itself. In this case, I think it's very clear that while we are celebrating the Netzach, the victory of the first 50 years of having Jerusalem reunited, we are also celebrating the Netzach, the eternity of having Jerusalem reunited forever under the Jewish state of Israel. We, the supporters of Israel and the supporters of Jerusalem, must be on the offensive. We must shift the narrative. It cannot just be all of us on the defensive anymore. For civil liberties, for religious freedom, for true democracy, Israel is the only country in that region of the world that stands up to the values that we hold so dear in the United States of America. And the best way to combat lies is with truth.
We know that you understand that the story of Israel, in many ways, the rebirth of Israel, and our return to this land and to this city, I think you understand in your hearts that this is a parable for all humanity.
In 1948, Israel as a nation received this body. But in 1967, with Jerusalem, Israel had a heart. We are proud to support Israel, proud to celebrate Jerusalem now, le'olam, forever.
Some people suggest if the United States would just break ties with Israel, all our problems in the Middle East would go away. This is a tired argument that buys into the propaganda of the enemies of peace. And America utterly rejects it.
America's commitment to the security of Israel is ironclad, and I might add, so is mine.
Like all Americans, I have been inspired by Israel's long struggle to survive and to flourish. America, as always, is proud to stand with you.
The Ford administration has done a good job in helping our good ally, Israel, and we're dedicated to the survival and security of Israel.
We will continue to work together for a just peace in the Mideast, which will protect the integrity of Israel, for which people have suffered so much and sacrificed so much.
Our support for Israel and its security is not simply a policy, it's a principle.
It is my attitude that the American government couldn't stand idly by while the victims of Hitler's madness were not allowed to build new lives.
I stand in awe
of the accomplishments of the Jewish people. And I make this promise to you, my administration will always stand with Israel.
There are hundreds, I will say thousands, of lawyers here in the United States and around the globe willing to defend, desiring to defend, winning these cases. This is our time, and this is our moment.
Your support of the American Center for Law and Justice allows us to defend Israel in international tribunals, in the courts of public opinion, and the halls of the legislatures. On this documentary, we've laid out the case of why Israel exists, why it must exist, and why we in the United States and those around the world need to defend the only true democracy in the Middle East. It's for our own interest, the interests of our allies. It's based on the law, based on the scriptures. It's based on decency and humanity. The case for Israel.
All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Again, if you want to see the full-length documentary put together by our great team here at ACLJ Films, just go to acljfilms.com, where you can find out how to watch, again, Protecting the Promised Land. You can also find out about all our other films we've made over the last decade, but Protecting the Promised Land is the new film about Israel and the current situation there. You can find that again. Just go there, easy. You'll see the instructions on how to watch it. acljfilms.com.
I wanted this book to send a very clear message and present a very clear defense on the importance of recognizing Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. I wanted to dispel the legal myths that were out there that Israel doesn't have the right to exist as a Jewish state, that Israel could not designate Jerusalem as its capital, that under international law the Israelis were somehow violating the human rights of others. And none of that was true. They're engaged in lawfare, utilization of the legal system to delegitimize the state of Israel. I built this almost as a Supreme Court case. Not only Israel has the right to exist, but has the right to exist as a Jewish state, and that they're entitled to the full recognition of any other sovereign government.
From New York Times bestselling author Jay Sekulow comes his new book, Jerusalem, a biblical and historical case for the Jewish capital.